Hello again, George Freestone with the eighth installment, I think, in the sequence of episodes about our baseball journey, the visits that my wife and I made to each of the 30 current major league ballparks and a few of those that are obsolete. Today, we're going to go to Boston, and as you can see in the backdrop, we're going to visit Fenway Park, a park rich with baseball history. But just like each and every other episode, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about my attire. And I'll start with the t-shirt, of course. Between Wrigley and Fenway, both very close to being the oldest major league park, but Fenway edges out Wrigley by, I think, 2 years. Fenway was built in 1912, Wrigley in 1914. So Fenway, the oldest park, still being used for Major League Baseball. My cap is the opponent that we saw during the day that we visited in 2013. It was, in particular, the Arizona Diamondbacks, and you can see that rattlesnake on top of the baseball on my cap. So we enjoyed a wonderful game at Fenway Park, but this wasn't our first time in Boston. As a family, we have been to Boston many, many times for the history, for college visits, for just the museums and the opportunities to check out everything that the city has to offer. And there are times that my family grew a little frustrated with me, and you'll hear a little bit more about that when we talk about the slide for Fenway Park. And let's go and pull up that slide right now. Let's go to full screen here for the slide so that you can all see it. Okay, the game that we saw was particularly well attended. You can't tell that by seeing the slide in the lower left. That was taken early in the game when we were walking around as they were getting ready to play the game. So it was well in advance of the opening pitch. However, the capacity for Fenway, I'm pretty sure, is around 37,300 for a day game. And I believe if you go to the box score right down here and click on that link, you'll see that the attendance that day was 37,600. So it wasn't the most well-attended game that we had attended in our trips to all these different parks. But in terms of the attendance relative to capacity, I think it was at the top. Okay, first bullet item. I mentioned college visits. We have visited many of the colleges in the Boston area, Harvard, MIT, Boston University. And it turns out that our daughter, Andrea, went for a graduate degree at Boston University. And she actually lived as a graduate student underneath that Citgo sign that you can see in the upper right of this particular screen, right above the scoreboard there on the, I believe that's right field at Fenway. So right underneath that Citgo sign, our daughter, Andrea, had a little postage stamp of an apartment that had megabucks required for rent. So again, we had a chance to enjoy paying rent in Boston. Okay. Now I'm going to skip to the fourth bullet because I want to tell maybe a funny story about our visits to Boston. We've been to Boston for the museums, the history, the restaurants, the colleges, But if you look at the map in the center left, I don't expect you to be able to make out the details here, but the red indicates the Freedom Trail, which is a walking trail in Boston that gives you a chance to really experience many of the different historical highlights in the city. And it's several miles if you take that entire trip. You can start the trip at Boston Common, which is at the lower left of the screen. It's a park area in Boston. And when we, during one of our visits, walked the Freedom Trail, we walked from Boston Common all the way over to Charleston, this area of town. And we were at the USS Constitution, which is this ship. It's moored right over here on that particular map. So we walked as a family almost the entire Freedom Trail. Well, it's possible that my family was a little frustrated with me. And you can see that frustration right here in the center on top of the Constitution. You can see my wife, Carol. She's even lost a little patience with me, I think. And Andrea and Patrick, without coaching, this is a real live shot. They both just were about to give up after a long day of visits and then also this Freedom Trail experience. I also have a nice frustration picture of the three of us. Carol, I think, took the picture in the top center. I think that was when we were making some college visits. And at the end of the day, you can see Andrea's rather frustrated with me and Patrick, maybe not feeling the greatest either. But Dad, I'm there smiling away. Well, the funny part of this is in 2024, our son's family went to visit some friends in Boston. And I happened to get from Patrick's wife, Angie, a text saying, hey, do you still have access to those pictures from the Freedom Trail and the frustration that your family felt with you? Those iconic, I believe she said, photographs. And the reason she asked for them is because they wanted to try and replay those photographs. And you can see two of them right around that area of this particular slide. First of all, you can see the chance for the entire family to kind of mimic this frustration picture. And then the boys, our grandsons, Tommy and John, do a great job of mimicking Andrea and Patrick on the Constitution here, with Tommy in particular with his t-shirt pulled up over his head, and John doing his best to mimic Andrea there. So that's a wonderful shot and made me laugh when I first saw those particular photographs. Okay. So, I probably should have mentioned it at the time, but when our daughter graduated from Boston University, we drove up and my father was with us. And here you can see one of the congratulatory photographs with Carol, Andrea, and my dad. Okay, second bullet, I've already talked about the fact that you got to be careful of the obstructions at Fenway. The other thing that I think I'll comment on is I'm not sure the seats are quite as wide as maybe they are at some of the other newer ballparks. So comfort isn't necessarily at the top either. That doesn't change the fact that Boston and Fenway are a very rich, in terms of baseball history, place to visit. It's a great park. And Andrea actually got to Fenway before I did. She got there because she went to graduate school at Boston University. All right. Another thing about Boston, it's the home of a great seafood chain, Legal Seafood. We've been there to several of the locations in the Boston area. There is, of course, a location at the King of Prussia Mall, if you're near Philadelphia. And when we visited Atlanta, we were surprised to find that there was illegal seafood there as well. Now, this game was a bit of a blowout. It was 4-zip, as you can see in the summary on the lower right, that is also a link to the box score. But interestingly, there were just about the same number of hits on both sides of the Diamondbacks and the Red Sox. Each team had about the same number of hits. Let me cover a couple of the remaining photographs that I haven't talked about. Big Papi, David Ortiz, lower portion right here. Here you can see him taking a mammoth swing. Interestingly, during this game, Big Papi went hitless, so didn't get a single hit. And there are many statues outside this ballpark, just as there are at other ballparks, but this one is a tribute to Ted Williams, one of the greatest Red Sox players ever, who concluded his career with 521 homers, which is significant given that he gave up 5 years to serve in the armed forces, both in World War II and the Korean War. Not only that, his love of children caused him to help create a fund for cancer, focusing on cancers in younger children and people of that age. And he made a big difference with funding the Jimmy Fund at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. Last thing I'll do on this slide, just on many of the other slides, is if you pull up the presentation, not in this YouTube video, but if you pull up the presentation, the link that you see as the last bullet on the left is a photo link, and that will take you to a Shutterfly album that will give you many more pictures focusing on the baseball game and the ballpark beyond what you've seen on this particular slide. So I think that's it for episode number 8. I'm going to stop the share, return here, say thank you, and encourage you to stay tuned for episode 9. Thank you very much.